Catholic Church moved into the New York waterfront, the Red Hook district. They thought they were sending in their priest missionaries. Again, we can refer back to on the waterfront, the priest that is sent in. They thought they were going to be fighting the communists who were controlling the waterfront. The communists were barely non-existent on the waterfront. Who controlled the waterfront were the gangsters. And although the higher-ups some may have been Italian, it was largely Irish gangsters terribly extorting Italian workers, immigrant Italian workers, largely. There was one communist there, though. I'm sure there were others, but the one was Peter Panto, Panto. He was a very brave man who took on the mob. He was a self-appointed labor leader on the Brooklyn waterfront. He was a communist, but he was an effective fighter. He could, enough to the point where he drove Albert Anastasia, the crime boss, just crazy. Burton Turkis, who had been the DA for Kings County, Brooklyn, he wrote that in the summer of 1939, Peter Panto was waging a determined war against the gangster rule on the waterfront. For months, he had been whipping up the longshoremen to shake off their mobster grip. Panto was only 28. "We are strong," he urges Union men. "All we have to do is stand up and fight." Panto's fate was sealed after he called a meeting in the ILA local International Longshoremen's Union, remarkably, incredibly to this day, corrupt union. The IL Local 929 on July 8, 1939. 1,250 people attended. It's incredible. And Pantos insisted on an open and honest election for the local. The longshoremen stood on their feet and they cheered him, while the mafia's enforcers looked on stupefied. They didn't know what to do. They had to have an honest election. So on Friday, July 14th, Panto was visiting his fiancée. She bore the very unfortunate name Mafia. At 10 p.m., there was a knock on the door. Panto answered the door. He stepped outside to talk to two men. And according to Abe Rellis, the men insisted that Abe Rellis was a member of Murder Inc., that Pantos come with them to meet a union official. He wanted to offer him some cash to leave the docks. Pantos refused. He said no. So they beat him nearly senseless, tossed him into a car, drove him to an isolated spot in Jersey. Panto was slight. He was a small man. He was around 5'5", weighed 165 pounds, but he fought like the devil. And according to Rellis, again, he nearly bit off the finger of one of his killers, another member of Murder Inc. named Mendy Weiss. But they overpowered him and they strangled him to death. He was tossed in a hole, covered in quicklime, and buried in a lot in New Jersey. The body's never been recovered because a tree has grown into the site now, and there probably isn't much of a body worth taking out. It's probably just dirt. Panto's death, though, eventually did help the press to give a feel of the injustice of what was going on there. And criminal justice workers and massive criminal investigations would eventually move in on the waterfront and try to correct it. It's never been corrected. It was so corrupt. The ship lines basically just moved down south to Florida, where they didn't have to deal with mobs, and New York's waterfront fell apart. But in the effort to get the mob out of there, it was Pantos who started all that.